great healer. Lord, I just thank you for all you do for us, Lord. I thank you for your love and your mercy and your grace. Lord, I just lift up these requests to you, Lord. I lift up every need that was mentioned, every need that wasn't mentioned, Lord, that's on our hearts. You know each of those needs, Lord, and we pray that your will would be done in each of those situations. Lord, I thank you for all these, my brothers and sisters that have come out this morning, Lord. I thank you for Daria, Lord, and I pray you bless her in her journey. Lord, we'll miss her. Heavenly Father, I just pray you give her watch care. Heavenly Father, I lift up David to you, Lord, as he brings our lesson this morning, Lord. I pray you bring back to remembrance of what he studied, Lord. I thank you for David and for Dickie and for the attention that they give our Bible study, Lord. I pray you bless them. Heavenly Father, it's good to be in your house, Lord. I pray that as we observe Memorial Day tomorrow, Lord, that you never let us forget those that gave the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom, Lord, so that we may worship you, that we may have those freedoms that others aren't capable of having, Lord. And I just pray that you'd never let us forget that sacrifice. Heavenly Father, thank you for all you do for us. Once again, I pray you forgive us where we fail. For it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Scott. And yes, absolutely. Thank you for remembering our veterans. It's very important that we do that. More than just on Memorial Day. Let's go ahead and look at our lesson this morning. This is the last in this series we've had. This is session 7 in this. And the title of it is Exploit Your Friends. So Dickie has graciously written instructions up here of what we're supposed to do with the lesson today. And we can dismiss right after. I probably need to erase that before we leave, because I can see somebody walking by visiting the church saying, what in the world are they teaching down there?
Don't worry, it's online now.
It's online. Thank you. It posted it. So obviously it's probably not what you expected to come and hear this morning, is a lesson on how to exploit our friends. But this is it's kind of an interesting parable this morning. Jesus used parables, which is just stories, to help get his point across a lot of times when he's teaching not only to his disciples but to the followers he had during that time. And he'd use things that they understood. He would always pull in things that they would, from their background, would know about what he was talking about when he would go into the parables. And it just helped, much the same way we do, right? A lot of us, when we're trying to explain something to someone, we will think of analogies to throw in and say, well, it's kind of like this, and that's what Jesus is doing with the parables. And it just helps us understand a lot of things that he teaches is totally foreign to us. If you think about the sacrificial love that he teaches us, and how we, what he gave for us, expecting nothing in return, is foreign to the world, right? When we love someone, we expect something in return. That's just the way we work. And so he's done this to help us with that, understanding very difficult concepts for us. So as we get into this, do you see in today's world a lot of questionable business deals go on? Not hardly straight up sometimes, is it? And I think it's funny that I like the little blurb in the Sunday school book, actually talking about the business. Minnetonka Corporation actually is the inventors. If you remember years ago, before the liquid soap became popular, now everybody's got liquid soap pumps all over their house. But early on, it was just in businesses. You saw it in commercial bathrooms and stuff like that. You didn't see pumps in people's homes. You had bar soap sitting there. Well, Minnetonka was the first company. They branded soft soap. So if you're old enough to remember soft soap, that was the only soap that you could buy for a period of time, because they marketed it and they controlled this. Well, the funny thing is how they control this kind of brings in some questionable business practices. So what they had done, they decided there's an opportunity here for us. We can make some money, and since nobody else is in this business right now, we know they had competitors that were making liquid soap that could easily step into this market once they saw how fruitful it was. But they decided they could control this a little bit since being first in. So they went to the only 2 manufacturers of plastic pumps for the dispensers that were making Plastic Pumps period at that time, and bought 100% of the inventory that they had for both of those. They bought over 1 million pumps from those companies, so they would have no more inventory to sell to their competitors. And of course, then they hit the market with it very hard and very quick to get their name brand out there as soft soap. So everybody would think, when you think of hand soap, you would think soft soap. We got to go get some soft soap. And it worked because there were no competitors to give them any challenge for at least 8 months, because it took some time to build inventory back up so they could sell not only to them but then to their competitors from these pump things. And you looked at it and think, well, that's, I think we'd call it a shrewd business deal, right? It's not necessarily just do good for your own business, but make sure your business competitors fail at the same time. You don't want them to succeed so you can succeed. And if you looked at it, you think, okay, that's true, but is it really ethical? No, but in today's world, it's dog eat dog, right? You go in, if you're in business, you get what you can, and if you can keep somebody else from taking part of your pie, you're more successful. And that's what we see a lot of times, and it's, there's this fine line between, when somebody says somebody's a shrewd business person, there's this fine line between shrewd and cheating. And we don't like to talk about the cheating part. We'll just say it's a shrewd business deal. We did a lot of thought on this and made sure we took care of things we need to take care of. So it kind of turns into that. So it's interesting this morning. The parable we're going to look at is in Luke. It's in Luke chapter 16, the first 12 verses. And it's a parable that's not taught from very much at all. I told Vicki this morning, I said, I wish this would have been yours to teach instead of mine this morning, because this is an interesting lesson that Jesus uses this as a parable to teach. He's teaching his disciples. Now at this point, Jesus is actually making his return to Jerusalem, finishing his ministry, because he's going to be crucified when he returns. So this is toward the latter stages of his ministry. And he's turned now he's been teaching the crowds that's been following, because, we mentioned last week, he had all these people following him because they knew of his teaching, the power in his teaching, the healing that he had done, and they had seen the miracles, and they want to be around that. So now he's turned his attention to his disciples. So this is his audience, is his disciples, saying, guys, I want you all to listen to me. And that's where he's talking to us today. We are his disciples today, right? We're the ones that's carrying his message out. And we have a job to do. He's talking to people who know him and have that relationship. And he's giving them some direction. Now, the direction is kind of funny. So when we get into this, we'll read through, and then we're going to try to dissect some of this and get into what he really was trying to get across to them. And let's go ahead and get into the scripture. And we'll break it apart a little bit. So Luke 16, verses 1 through 12, and I'm going to go ahead and read it all, and then we'll go back. So now he said to the disciples, there was a rich man who received an accusation that his manager was squandering his possessions. So he called the manager in and asked, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you can no longer be my manager. Then the manager said to himself, what will I do, since my master has taken the management away from me? I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do, so that when I am removed from management, people will welcome me into their homes. So he summoned each of his master's debtors and asked, how much do you owe my master? He asked the first one, 100 measures of olive oil, he said. Take your invoice, he told him. Sit down and quickly write 50. Next he asked another, how much do you owe? 100 measures of wheat, he said. Take your invoice, he told him, and write 80. The master praised the unrighteous manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the children of this age are more shrewd than the children of light in dealing with their own people. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of worldly wealth, so that when it fails, they may welcome you into eternal dwellings. Whoever is faithful in little is also faithful in much. And whoever is unrighteous in very little is also unrighteous in much. So if you have not been faithful with worldly wealth, who will trust you with what is genuine? If you have not been faithful with what belongs to someone else, who will give you what is your own? And if you read through that, and I read through it, and then I read through it, and then I read through it, and I'm thinking, Lord, I don't think you want me to teach this morning. There's another one that's a lot better in here, like every other one that's in the Bible. And it's funny when I read through some of the other study guides and stuff like that, and every one of them starts off with, "This is a very difficult lesson to teach." And I'm like, yeah, thanks. Appreciate the knowledge. I already know that when I read this. But it's actually, I think it's a very good lesson for us. And it's interesting when we break it down to understand why he's doing what he's doing, how he's explaining this, because it is important for us to understand. And I think it really gets back to, are we using the things that he's given us charge of in the most appropriate way? Are we taking advantage of what he's given us? Now, we've talked before, does God give us all talents once we are his children?
Yes.
We're saved for more than just sitting in the seat, aren't we?
Yes.
So we all have these special gifts, and we may not consider it special. You know, we downplay so many things, don't we? Because we don't want to brag on this and that. We don't want to seem like we're being braggadocious on things. But God gave us things very specifically, and that may be things that we talked about last week a little bit that was uncomfortable for us. But He gives us jobs to do, and He gives us talents to do those jobs. And it may be something as simple. I remember Miss Renfro years ago. She had been incapacitated for a lot of years, homebound, and just lost her mobility and stuff. She'd had multiple heart attacks and things like that. And I remember talking to her one day, and she said, "I just can't do anything anymore. I can't do anything to further God's kingdom anymore." And she was so disheartened about that. But she sent card after card after card, and she would send sometimes 10, 15 cards a week to people that the Lord laid on her heart, that just needed a card that said, "Hey, I love you and God loves you." And I sit and talk to her, and I said, "You don't know what kind of ministry you have." I said, "A card ministry is huge." I said, "People's receiving these cards at times where they need someone just to say, 'I'm thinking about you today.'" And I said, "That may mean the world to someone." And I said, "So you're doing a very valuable thing in what you're doing." And it's easy for us to do things like that, isn't it? Well, I didn't do much this week. I just took something over to somebody, or I picked something up for them, or it may be as simple as the thing you bring is being able to go to people and encourage them. If you've ever been around Gary Garrettson very long, Gary is one of those people who is an encourager. That's his gift. He will build you up and try to tell you what you're doing right. And I told him, I said, "Man, that's a great gift, because a lot of people don't have that, about just totally focused on someone else and helping encourage them to do more of what they're doing and serve God." So there's gifts we all have, and I think it's what he's getting at here when you look at the crux of this story, and we'll break down a few pieces of this, but if you look at the crux of this, I think he's trying to help us understand we have to use those gifts the best we can use them. Now, as we get into it a little bit, you see, he calls the master calls this manager in that's working for him. Now, he's a trusted manager. He's not somebody that has been forced into this, or is just taking care of a small piece of his property for him because he owns him, which was very common during that time. But this was someone who he would have trusted with lots of his fortune to take care of these things and to do business in his behalf with merchants and with individuals around the area. Thus, the access he had to be able to go in and change these amounts on this. But it's interesting, the story starts off with, he's heard that he squandered what he's done. He's not done a very good job of managing. So he's called him in and said, "Hey, we need to talk. I'm hearing that you're not doing well." Well, this manager, the man knew how serious this was. He was getting ready to lose his job on this. And you see very quickly, he says, "I want you to give an account," in verse 2, "of what you have done with what you've been entrusted." Does Jesus call us to give an account of how we use the things he's given us?
Yes.
I think very much so. I think he expects us He expects us to take what we've been given and use it for Him. It don't matter if it's a physical talent that we use, whether it's what we talked about with somebody writing cards or your ability to talk to people, whatever it may be. It can also be how we use the resources He's given us, the money He's given us, the things He's put in our possession are for Him, right? I mean, everything we do in our lives, inside and outside, should bring glory and honor to God. So how we use these things that He's given us is so important, and we will be held accountable for that. He will ask us, what have you done with these things? He knows the answer, but He's going to ask us, what have you done with these things? And a lot of it is our attitude toward them. And we see this as he's starting to give his account. He goes on into this because he knows what's fixing to happen. He's getting ready to lose his job. And his thought turns immediately to what ours would. I'm getting ready to lose my job. What's your first thought?
What can I do to save it?
Yeah. What can I do to save it, or what do I do now?
Right.
And if you look at what he does, he takes some steps. He starts thinking in his head, I know what I'll do. I'll go to people who owe my master and work a deal with them. You went that one and said, you owe 100 counts of measures of oil. Make it 50. And then he goes another and on wheat and says, make it, you owe 100, make that 80. And stuff. He's building this rapport with them, saying, if I lose my job, I'll cut y'all a real deal, and maybe you all will hire me, take me in, because he's obviously at the age he says he can't dig, and he don't want to beg. That's just, he feels like that's the only two options he's got left to do at his age. So he's trying to get someone who will take him in and maybe give him a job doing what he's doing today for this person. Now it's funny, and we'll get into this more in just a minute, that the master praises him for that, and I want to come back and touch on that because that's the thing that's a little odd. Well, I'll say a lot odd about this lesson. But it's interesting to me when I started thinking through this. Jesus actually taught on this quite a bit, didn't he? About using our talents. Don't squander your talents, and he tells us not to do this. And one of the ones I want to read real quickly, and you'll be very familiar with this story, is the parable of the loaned money. And we see this in Matthew. It's in Matthew 25, verse 14 says, again, the kingdom of heaven can be illustrated by the story of a man going on a long trip. He called together his servants and trusted his money to them while he was gone. He gave 5 bags of silver to one, 2 bags of silver to another, and 1 bag of silver to the last, dividing it in proportion to their abilities. And then he left on his trip. The servant who received the 5 bags of silver began to invest the money and earned 5 more. The servant with 2 bags of silver also went to work and earned 2 more. But the servant who received the 1 bag of silver dug a hole in the ground and hid the master's money. After a long time, their master returned from his trip and called him to give an account of how they used his money. Again, an account will be given. The master's saying, what have you done with what I've entrusted you with? And the servant to whom he had trusted 5 bags of silver came forward with 5 more and said, Master, you give me 5 bags of silver. To invest, I have earned 5 more. The master was full of praise and said, well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful of handling this small amount. Well done, my good and faithful. You have been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together. The servant who had received the 2 bags of silver came forward and said, Master, you gave me 2 bags of silver to invest, and I have earned 2 more. Again, the master said, well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together. Then the servant with 1 bag of silver came and said, Master, I knew you were a harsh man, harvesting crops you didn't plant and gathering crops you didn't cultivate. I was afraid I would lose your money, so I hid it in the earth. Look, here's your money back. But the master replied, you wicked and lazy servant. If you knew I harvested crops I didn't plant and gathered crops I didn't cultivate, why didn't you at least deposit my money in the bank to gain interest? And he takes away. He says, to the servant, 1 bag of silver. He said, but the master told him, you wicked and lazy servant. Oh, why don't you deposit my money? I'm getting back where I was. Then he ordered, he said, take the money from this servant and give it to the one that has 10 bags of silver. To those who will be used well what they are given, even more will be given, so they will have an abundance. But from those who do nothing, even that little bit shall be taken away. I feel like these go hand in hand. Now, the end of the story on these is a little bit different, the way Jesus approaches what the Master has done. But I think it's so interesting that we see the similarities in this. Is we've been given things to do, we've been given jobs to do, and for those who take those talents and use them for His glory, He multiplied them, didn't He? They multiplied it double, and He said, I'm going to give you more. If you're taking this little things and you're doing what I've asked you to do with those, and you're being faithful in those, I'm going to give you more responsibility and more responsibility and more responsibility. And we see that in people, don't we? If you see people in the church, someone who is, I'm going to use an example, and it's maybe a bad example, but someone who's a pastor of a very large church typically didn't step into the role of a pastor of a very large church day one. They start off doing these ministries and these ministries and these ministries, and I kind of likened that to that God said, you were very faithful in this small thing I gave you. So I'm going to give you more responsibility and more responsibility and more responsibility, as long as that person is willing to give that to God and work for the right reason to do that. He multiplies those things. The same for us. Now, it's not to say that if we go into that to you, that if I go out and work hard with my money, God's going to give me a lot more money. No, that's the wrong attitude, because we're thinking, I want more, so I'll give this so I get more. And that's not what He's trying to get across. But if we're willing to do the things with the talents and the things that He's put around us to further His kingdom, He's going to give us more responsibility, isn't He? He's going to open more doors for us. So sometimes that may mean more work on this. There's going to be times, it's like when we went and visited, we need to schedule time to do that again, by the way. Going into some homes to invite people to church. But as you knocked on doors that evening, it was more difficult early on than it was by the time we were done, wasn't it? For those who were doing that. First couple of doors you knock on, it's like, you stand there and think, okay, what am I going to say? What are they going to come out? They're going to come out and say, what are y'all doing to my boards? You never know what you're going to get when you're not on somebody's door cold around here. And after a few doors, it's like, okay, yeah, we've got to stand. We know what to say now. We're going down to church, and the conversation got much easier as it went. It's the same with our ministries and everything we do. It's all about practice. We take what God has given us, and we use it. And as we use it, I think our circle of comfort grows in that. It's like playing ball. We've talked before about playing basketball. If you played basketball very much when you were young, you can think back and, it seemed like when you get better at a sport, you hear announcers talk about this all the time, it slows down for you. So you start predicting more where the ball's going to go. You start understanding more of what an offense is trying to do and how to adjust for that. So the game slows down for you. Players certainly don't slow down, but in your mind, you're stepping ahead in that. If you haven't played very much, does it seem like the game is slow to you? And when you go and play basketball now at this age, it's ugly. I just tell you, I've tried it and broke a finger, and I was like, I'm done. I've learned. I broke a finger on one game and tore a calf muscle on another game, and I thought, the Lord's trying to tell me not to do that anymore. And I listened. I don't do that anymore. But if you practice and you practice and practice, what starts off as here is your comfort level, and you're able to do certain things. You may be, I'm really good at doing layups, or I may be good at doing a shot off backboard from the side or whatever. And it gets better and better, and our circle of comfort grows. Now, I watched Caleb and Jessica come over to the house last night, and we flipped on the NBA playoff game. I don't even know who was playing, honestly, but it was the playoff game. I know that. Yes. I never seen anything like it. That's the first time I've watched a professional basketball game in a long time. As soon as they get over half court, it was a get fire game. I'm like, they're throwing a balls from everywhere, and they were going in. But I guarantee when they first started playing ball, they couldn't do that. Their comfort zone got bigger and bigger as they practiced a lot and they got better at it. I think we do that as Christians. the more we do with what he has given us, the more he's going to give us. And the more he's going to give us. And what he may be giving us is this comfort around sharing your testimony. Y'all did a great job, by the way, the Wednesday night. Oh my goodness. For those, if you weren't able to be here Wednesday night, man, I got chills just mentioning just now. It was awesome. And really appreciate y'all sharing your testimonies and the things you had gone through. And I know the kids took a lot away from that. But that's uncomfortable, isn't it? I know, Dan, you look like you were entirely comfortable. Or not Dan, Matt, sorry. You remind me of a Dan I work with. But as we do more of those things, God gives us a little more comfort, a little more comfort. Now, will he take all the discomfort away of sharing your testimony? I hope not. I hope it's always a good struggle, because if it is, we're going to depend on him, aren't we? It's like when we sing. I told somebody the other day, we've sang this year will be 35 years that our quartet sang together. I still get very nervous the night before we sing, especially at this church. They'll probably get more nervous here than we do anyway, all of us. And you'd think after 35 years that would be gone. It's just not. I still get sweaty palms when I get up to teach after 25 years or whatever it's been. But that keeps God in the focus, because I know I can't do this. And that's what we always need to remember, that as we grow our circle, yeah, there's going to be a little more comfort out here as we grow and expand on what God has given us to do. But it's not going to be as hard as it was. We're going to have a little bit, because we've gained some experience, right? As we grow in this, we say, oh, I've did that before. It's like going knocking on the doors. I've done that before. It wasn't that bad. So the next one's a little easier, and then the next one's a little easier. And we get this because we gain that experience, that we understand what's going on. Now, in looking at this, it's kind of interesting. There's a couple of theories on why the master has praised this man for what he did. He's being a shrewd businessman. He went out to take care of himself, but in doing so, he gave away his master's return on what was owed to him. And I'm thinking, okay, not too many people is going to come and say, man, that was a great job, that was a good thought. You just gave away a bunch of my stuff. That was awesome. I like it. I don't see it happening today. So there's some thoughts here that say, some people say, well, maybe that was interest owed. Maybe they actually owed a lot more than that over a period of time, and this was still interest that was owed, that he was knocking off. It may have been part of this person's kind of like the tax collectors at that time. The more they overcharged is how they made their money. It may have been that part of this that he was taking off was his cut of the return on this. So there's some reasons why the master may not have been upset. It may not have been his money that was getting cut off. It may have been the man who was giving that back, who may have been taking the cut. Kind of makes more sense with that being, if that's the case. Again, it's speculation.
David, I think that after reading this, I think that the rich man didn't know what he had, and his account was based on his books. Mm-hmm. So basically, this manager made himself look good by pretending that he collected these debts.
Could be.
And that's what he's getting praised for. In all actuality, he's lying, saying, "Oh yeah, I got you back 50 measures of olive oil and 20 measures of wheat."
Yeah. Cook the books.
Cook them.
Yeah, that's possible. That's very possible. I mean, it's all speculation, right?
Yeah, right.
But that's a very plausible theory that could be happening like that. So when you look at this and you look at this saying, yeah, he was a shrewd business person for making these deals to take care of himself and try to arrange his future. What do I do now? Type thing, because he knew he was getting ready to go on the street. So I think it's interesting that the master actually says he did a very good job in thinking of this. Now, obviously, the goal would be not to get to that point, right? So we are going to be held accountable. We talked about that. God is going to hold us accountable for what we have done with what we have been given. What you don't want to be is called in on the carpet, is what we used to say at work. You get called in on carpet, it's not a good day. You want to go in and say, here's what I've done for you, and hear those words, good and faithful servant. And that's not what was happening here. So he had to make some very, very quick decisions. And I'm going to say maybe thinking outside the box a little bit. And I think that's what the master was praising him for, is you finally stepped up. You blew all this time. You could have been doing this for me. Now you're done with me. But at least you started taking initiative and doing the things you should have been doing all along, which was trying to do business in a way that would make people trust and want to do business with you, or you secured your future, whatever it may be, by doing this. Now, it's not to say we need to go out and cheat people to try to get them into the kingdom of God, okay? That's not what he's trying to get across. But he's saying you finally did something. You stepped out and you did with what you had available to you to make sure you secured your future, what you could do. And I think that's what he's trying to get across to him here. It's not saying that that's the right thing to do from the business dealing side, but that's the right thought process of trying to do that early on and try to secure things and do with the resources we have before it gets to this point that we've lost these things. And he tells us, we're reminded over in Matthew as well, he says, for those who have been given little and did nothing with it, I'm going to take those things away also and give it to the person who's using it. Tells me we could lose the talents with God. He may say, you know, if you're not willing, I've given you these things to do, and I've given you the tools to do it with. He may say, these can be much better, much used over here. Now, does that mean we're not Christians anymore? No. Does it mean we could be less effective and not have not receive those blessings? Absolutely.
I think God puts people in there like our friends. He puts people there that have talents, and sometimes if we try to take control, we try to do everything, and we think, well, we better do it. I'm not going to go ask them to do it. I'll just do it. And then their talents are wasted. And I've done that before, and I don't think I've taken advantage of just my friends as far as, like it's on the board. I didn't have trust in God. I didn't have trust in them. I thought I could control it all and do it all.
Yeah. And it's difficult for us to give that over, isn't it? Some of us, and I'm one of those, you know, I like it done a certain way, so I'll just do it. Yeah. And we actually take away someone else's blessing, don't we?
Even my children. I gotta quit doing everything for my children and let them do it so their talent can come through.
Yes.
You know, let them try to mow the yard when they get older. You know, it may not look to my standards, but they're developing their talents.
Right. Again, it'll start here and get their comfort level will get bigger, won't it, as they do this? Absolutely. And yeah, we do that. I'm bad about doing that. You know, just if I can do it the way I want to do it, so I'll just do it. And at church we need to do the same thing. We need to give people opportunities to step up and maybe force people into a position of servitude that may want to, but just don't want to step in and push anybody else out or anything like that. I'm gonna shut that door. Thing's not on anyway. It's only about 5,000 degrees up here. So yeah, we need to be mindful of that to give other people opportunities to do this. Now, I think the thing that kind of ties this together for me, and it took me a minute for this to, after I read through it like the 10th or 11th time, this verse finally caught my attention the way it should have started with. The second half of verse 8 says, "For the children of this age are more shrewd than the children of light dealing with their own people." The people of this age. So the people who are living in the world are doing the things, and they're being shrewd, and they're making decisions to further the things, to gain things, and it may be for personal use, but they are more shrewd in doing the things they should be doing than what we've been given by God, the children of light. We've been given a job to do by the God on high, has said, I trust you to do this. And you know, he's looking at us sometimes, and as he did his disciples, I know Jesus had about beat his head on a rock half the time when he's talking to his disciples, because he'd teach them, and they turn around and ask questions. He's like, did you not hear anything I just said? You know, we're very much like that. But he's saying, I trust you with this. I'm going to give you this talent, and I'm going to trust you to go do this. And he gives us the leeway to do it in the way we do it. But how sad is it that the world is better at doing that with the material things that we have around us than we are with eternal things that we've been given responsibility for. And I think that's where it comes down to. It's when you read through all that, it's kind of like, wow, this don't make sense until that right there. Verse 8 to me makes sense. That he's saying, here's the crux of this thing. Pay attention to this part, because this is what I'm talking to the Christians about. In this way, we need to act like the world a little bit, right? And that's an odd thing for us to say we need to act like the world, but in a way that the world is hungry to grow their money, and we see it all the time. I mean, they'll do anything to grow their fortunes, right? Step on people, push people back, take advantage of people, whatever it may be. Now, God's not saying we need to do all that to further the kingdom of God, because that's not really what defeats the purpose, doesn't it? But if we have that same zeal that the world has for money to see God's kingdom grow, what would we do? That's a different story. And I think that's what he's trying to get across. Say, guys, I want you to have that same excitement, that same fire that the world does to grow here, to grow my kingdom. And that's when we're going to see great things happen. And I think we'll see great things happen as we go forward. I think we have to step back sometimes and understand God has a plan. God has a plan for our life. He has in mind, he knows what will make us have life more abundantly. And he tells us that's what he wants for us, isn't it? And that doesn't mean a bigger house, bigger cars, bigger whatever. That means he wants us to have a peaceful life. He wants us to have things that he can give us, and he only can give us. That's what our abundant life is. But we have got to be in a position that we give it to him. That's the only way we're going to have life in abundance. Like he said, if you're faithful in these things, I'm going to give you more. I think if we're faithful and we have peace, we're going to get more peace, and we're going to get more peace. Now, it's not going to be perfect on earth, ever, because we're living in a sinful world, and we are foreigners in this sinful world passing through. Now that our home is in heaven. But we're going to have those moments of peace. And I think we all have them at different points, where it's just all of a sudden, things are right. And it's unexplainable many times, but there's just those moments that I think he gives us these little glimpses to say, sorry, this is what a very minute speck of what heaven will be like when we get here. That we're going to have that peace. We're not going to have this constant struggle with our worldly self, trying to fight with our godly nature that we have taken on after becoming a child of God. It's very difficult for us to go through this. I think sometimes we've got to let ourselves be put in an uncomfortable position so that we know. It's in verse 11 and 12, to wrap it up, it says, so if you have not been faithful with worldly wealth, who will entrust you what is genuine? And if you've not been faithful with what belongs to someone else, who will give you what is their own? I think it's the last statement he's saying, guys, listen, all this boils down to this. If we look at it in our worldly eyes, if someone's not been faithful to something you've given to them, are you going to give them more? No. It's just bad business, isn't it? It's throwing good money after bad, call it. God's saying, guys, listen, I'm giving you this right here today. I'm not going to continue to give this unless you use it and you grow it and you grow it and you grow it. And yeah, we're not going to be perfect. And we're going to make mistakes along the way. And we're going to have setbacks along the way. But we're going to have opportunities to do stuff that will blow our mind if you give it to God. Hopefully, as you've matured in your Christian walk, from when you first got saved, you can look back now of things you would do now versus the way you were reacted when you were a young Christian. Not age, but length of time being a Christian. That you would have thought, I couldn't have done that back then. I wouldn't have done that back then. I wouldn't have been willing to do that back then. That's what he wants us to do, and I think that's what we're seeing here as we look back through our Christian walk, and as we plan our walk now going forward. We need to be looking, how do we grow? How do we use the things that God has put in our control to say, how can I make this better for God? How can I grow God's kingdom? We've all been told the Great Commission is to go out and carry His message into a lost and dying world and make disciples. We can't do that sitting here and it not go outside the doors. It's uncomfortable. It's not what we want to do many times, but that's where the world is. The world's not sitting in here. We've got to carry this message out, and we've got to reach a world that needs us to step outside of our comfort zone and use the things that God has given us to use. And He's going to bless that, and He's going to multiply that over time as we use those things. Thank you all for being here. I hope you have a great day.